I want to see how he spins this. I don't know how long this video is. Let's see here. I think it's like 6 minutes and something, which means probably about 5 minutes of content. Let's see what Ryan's got to say here. I am curious how he's going to spin this one.
It's official. Just as so many of us predicted and thought and theorized, with the lack of interest in Disney Star Wars and specifically The Mandalorian and Grogu, its official box office opening domestically is indeed less than
by 2 million that was projected in the early ticket sales. So we're making videos about $2 million now when it comes to box offices. That's what we're doing, guys. We're making videos. They made 100, not 102, but they made 163 total, which is only 2 million less than the actual production budget of the movie. Absolute failure, everyone.
That of the biggest Disney Star Wars disaster theatrically that we've ever seen. Solo, a Star Wars story. The Mandalorian and Grogu is officially the lowest opening Disney Star Wars movie ever.
Okay, so Luis Fernando here on Twitter. I hate Twitter. I probably won't be there much more after the end of May. But if you're going to use Twitter, guys like Luis are the ones worth following. They don't do bullshit. They pretty much post just information. Updated weekend figures, 1 million lower for Mandalorian and Grogu at U.S. box office, despite positive word of mouth. Word of mouth is going to be more important next weekend. That'll be something that we'll see next weekend. I don't really count word of mouth on the opening weekend. Opening weekend is for people that had already intended to go. They saw the advertising or they're already interested in the property because of XYZ. They go opening weekend. Next weekend will determine word of mouth. After grossing 81 million on lowest 3-day opening for a 3-day opening. Okay, so that's why. Okay. After grossing 81 million on lowest 3-day opening for Star Wars debut under Disney, failing to beat Solo's 84, it's still topping industry projections. So it's not counting the 4-day weekend. All right. Number 12, biggest 3-day opening for Memorial Day releases ever, beating the Lost World Jurassic Park 72.1. So it beat a Jurassic World movie, which pretty impressive. Number 3, biggest weekend of 2026, beating Project Hail Mary, only under Michael's 97.2 and Super Mario Galaxy's 131. So it's doing really good this year in terms of opening weekends. And then it's got a list of the biggest 3-day weekend releases in history here. It says, compared to last year's Memorial Day debuts, it beats Mission Impossible's Final Reckoning 64 million, although way below Lilo and Stitch's 146. I mean, well, it's Lilo and Stitch. I'm just going to say. Like, this property alone, and you might say Star Wars, but Lilo and Stitch, that's a different category. So he was pulling the 3-day weekend numbers, which isn't lying, but this is what these guys do really well, is they leave out important information. They leave out important information so that their narrative can be painted. That's why they do this.
Just as I theorized in the past few weeks what I thought this box office would do when we heard those $80 million 4-day weekend forecasts. What I said back then is, you know what? I think it's going to get higher than that. I think it's going to be close to that 9,500 million 4-day holiday opening weekend numbers, but it's still going to be less than Solo. And everyone's going to desperately try to focus on the fact that, well, it beat its terrible expectations and ignore.
Oh, so that's a goalpost shift. Red flag, red flag, red flag. The expectations come from the actual analyst. That's the numbers they want to see. That's the numbers they're expecting to see, right? Ryan Kinel is just a dude on the internet. I don't care what your fucking projections are. I don't care what your goalposts are for this movie. Why do I give a fuck? Why does anybody give a fuck? To be quite honest. It beat the projections that the analysts from the studios put forward, that the people in Hollywood put forward. Why do we give a fuck about Ryan Kinel's projections for this movie? What fucking difference does that make in any world?
Nor the fact that it fell below Solo. And sure enough, here you have it. Star Wars box office rebound. The Mandalorian and Grogu makes major gains on Saturday for a $102 million domestic debut. Now, that was a little bit too emphatic of them. In reality, it's about an $81 million 3-day opening.
That isn't how it works with Memorial Day. Memorial Day weekends count as a 4-day weekend. Historically, you look back, you're looking at Memorial Day as an individual weekend. That's how the industry looks at it. This is cope. This is cope. I'm sorry. You titled cope for Disney Star Wars? No, it should be cope for you. Cope for outrage content. They hit the projections and they made their production budget back in one weekend.
$100 million 4-day opening. The international numbers are not great for this movie either. I think it's right around $160 million worldwide. Or right here it says $163 million worldwide. That's where it's at. To put this in perspective, it is slightly higher than Solo's worldwide and slightly lower than their domestic. When it comes to something like The Thunderbolts, this is opening very similar to a movie like The Thunderbolts that came out, which was...
The Thunderbolts in this movie are not catering to the same audience, by the way. This movie is catering to a family audience. Thunderbolts was not. You're just comparing them because one is Marvel and one is Lucas.
It was a box office disaster for Marvel. Yet,
Right. So now we're going to take this arbitrary Marvel movie with a different demographic audience and go, hey, look, this thing didn't perform well. So that must mean that the Star Wars movie is going to perform exactly the same. I mean, why do people watch this shit?
it's still, you have the people that are trying to cope, like with headlines like this from Global Box Office. Mandalorian and Grogu surpassed the $165 million mark at the global box office on a $165 million budget. Now, they didn't straight up say it made its money back, but they're trying to imply that. Star Wars...
Because it did. You wouldn't implicate that. You would say it did. It cost 165. It made roughly 163. I don't have to imply that it made its budget back. It did. That's not what the word imply or implication means. They literally made their budget back. There's no alluding to it.
News does exactly this. Look at this. The Mandalorian and Grogu has crossed 160 million at the global box office. This nearly recoups its entire reported production budget of 165 million.
Right.
Unfortunately, this is not operating in reality. This is a desperate attempt to spin the narrative, just like...
Oh, so, okay, I'm very curious what the narrative they're spinning is. Because the estimated budget, the same numbers that you guys use for every fucking clickbait video you make, that's the number that people are running with. So in what world is the estimated 165 budget and the 163 asterisk pull in from the whole weekend? In what world is that a narrative? Can you explain this to me? What's the narrative here? They're saying, hey, this was the estimated budget. This is how much it made, so it made its budget back.
So many people do when these movies bomb. And, make no mistake, this is a terrible opening for this movie, considering what they're trying to get out of it.
Right, so what are they trying to get out of it, Ryan? What is it that they're trying to do? Are they trying to make their money back on the film? Oh, they did that already. They did that. So what is the next goalpost then? Is it marketing? We'll find out this upcoming week if they make their marketing back. And then what will the goalpost be? Will it be quality? Will it be the critic scores? They don't agree with you either. If you go and you look at the online aggregate sites, they disagree with this movie not being good. They all disagree with that. So what's the next goalpost then? What are we going to move it to then? You can't call it woke or any of the other things that you guys normally do. I am surprised you haven't used the word slop yet. I've heard that tossed around a few times. So I'm really curious what the issue is here with them just putting out, hey, this is how much it made, and this is how much it cost to make. I'm really curious.
This is a movie that needs around $500 or $600 million to...
Red flag. It does not. It does not. You do not have insider information on how much marketing costs. Keep in mind that he's talking about a movie with $165 million estimated budget, bro math. But I also want to point out something that these guys never mention because they're fucking assholes when it comes to this stuff, is these movies, especially movies made for children, are vehicles for merchandise. That's what they are. The movie is made to sell toys. The movie is made for them to try and make other spin-offs from the movie, maybe cartoons for kids, things like that. Because now that we've introduced Grogu to a wider audience with the movie, now that we've done that, now they can do like a kid version Grogu cartoon that has nothing to do with anything Star Wars. It's just a separate little cartoon with Grogu in it or something along those lines. They can do those things because now we've widened the net for people that know who Grogu is, which was, I think, the intention based on everything we've seen here. The intention was to make Grogu a more important character because it, you know, I know there might be spoilers for the movie here. We're going to walk into another video here in a second that might have spoilers, and I won't spoil anything here yet, but there's a scene or a segment of the movie where Grogu is doing a bunch of stuff on his own, and clearly it's there to make Grogu more visible and important to the audience. So that was, if we're being real here, keeping it a buck, the intention is to make toys and sell toys and t-shirts and merchandise. I'm literally wearing a Grogu t-shirt right now. That's the intention of this. So if you're trying to make believe some numbers, so he's telling you that a movie that costs 165 million needs to make over 500 million to be profitable? Bro, in what world? And what fucking planet in Star Wars are we where that math makes any sense? You're saying it has to make its entire production budget back twice to be profitable? Are you serious? Are we serious here?
Break even, depending on what they actually spent on ads. Even the Hollywood Reporter.
So you're saying they spent 300 million on ads? And you had the nerve to put cope in the title for people that say the cope is that the movie made back its production budget. That's the cope. But you're sitting here doing bro math and pulling numbers out of your fucking ass. Oh, it needs to make 500 million. I don't know how much he's... Hold on. No, wait. It's even better than that. Let's jump back here. He says he doesn't know how much they spent on ads. How can you give me a number for profitability based on marketing when you literally say, hey, I don't know how much they spent on ads? He says it. Listen.
For this movie, considering what they're trying to get out of it. This is a movie that needs around $500 or $600 million to break even, depending on what they actually spent on ads. Even the Hollywood...
Depending on what they actually spent on ads. So bro doesn't know. He doesn't know. Where's the clown nose? Where's the wig? Where's the big flappy shoes at? You're sitting here telling people that the movie needs to make 500 to 600 million to break even, and then you don't even know how much they spent on the ads. Oh my God.
Hollywood Reporter admits that, right? Even the Hollywood Reporter admits that this is a movie that must break 500 or 600 million dollars to break even. This current opening, if it holds a...
One thing they never factor in is like tax incentives or breaks in film. Oh, the movie received 28.1 million back in California tax credits. This came from the Hollywood Reporter. Interesting. So that means the movie actually cost 143 million in production costs. Interesting. What I'm seeing here about the 600 million, 500 to 600 million thing he's quoting from Hollywood Reporter is, again, bro math. There's no person cited in the article. But just for clarity's sake, this is the article where they talk about the tax credits. In case people would be like, where's your receipts? You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea. 21 million in tax credits. This came from 2024. It's been out there for a while. Let's jump back over here to Bro Math Ryan Kinel.
a similar trajectory to Solo. I've always said I thought it would hold a little bit better because more families are going to be watching it. It's going to end up in that $400 million range, $400+ million range, 425, something like that. It will lose money at the box office. That's what is going to happen in all likelihood.
I don't think it will, but even if it does lose a little bit of money, that's not, the movie is clearly made to do more than just make box office money. By the way, I also want to point out, and this is something they never mention either, these movies make money when they go to VOD streaming, between 50 and 100 million. They never report on this. So typically when a movie leaves theaters or it's still in theaters and it comes out early access on VOD, the movie will make 50 to 100 million on streaming. And you add that into the box office as profit for the studios. Now the box office numbers, like the box office sites, don't count that because they're only counting ticket sales. But any money that it makes on VOD and streaming also gets included in the investors' money that goes into these movies, the studio's money that goes into these movies. And we know it's between 50 and 100 million. So almost any movie in theaters that comes out, if the movie doesn't perform super well, you can go super conservative and go, oh, it's only going to make 50 million on the VOD streaming, and add that on if you want to be super conservative. If the movie does pretty good in theaters, you can go 75. If it does really well, it's probably going to do 100. That's typically the way it works. They'll never talk about that. They'll never mention that.
With Mandalorian and Grogu, here it is. $165 million before the ad campaign of at least 100 million likely.
It's actually 143 because this site the reason why I brought up Hollywood Reporter is because Hollywood Reporter reported last year that the tax credits brought down the production cost to 143. But here we are, actually it was 2024. So 2 years ago, they knew about the tax credit. Here we are with Hollywood Reporter still saying it's 165 million. Still saying that, even though they're the ones that had the story about the $21 million tax credit. That was them. That was their site.
Globally, even Collider, right? The Mandalorian and Grogu isn't bombing, it's suffering from Star Wars expectations. The film opened in the same box office range as hits like Dune Part 2 and Project Hail Mary, but comparisons to Solo, a Star Wars story, already dominating the conversation. Do you know why? Because these are different franchises.
Right, so why are you comparing it? Why are you comparing Mandalorian and Grogu to other Star Wars properties? Why are you doing that? If it's so obvious to you that these are different franchises, sub-franchises, if you will, within Star Wars, if you're agreeing to that, then why did you spend half of your video comparing it to other Star Wars movies? Instead of just going, hey, this movie is a brand new thing for Star Wars. It's essentially a new film franchise for Star Wars. We already know about Mandalorian on Disney+. This is a new Star Wars franchise that's putting out its first thing, which means the bar, the expectation is much lower. Matter of fact, in case we have to remember, I have to remind you guys, we have to remember the projections were 80 to 100. It got 80 to 100. It made back its production budget. He is digging here to try and find things to disparage this movie about, when we can see the numbers for ourselves. That's where we're at.
Project Hail Mary had a massive opening considering it's a very lesser known IP. It was just a book, right? It's not even like an IP, a franchise. When it comes to Star Wars and Marvel and DC, these type of properties, they're very top heavy in terms of the amount of people that go see in that opening weekend because the hype levels are lit. That's what these franchises are about, right? These people who are building up and building up and building it up. So it's super weighted on the first weekend. What we normally see from these big franchises for big
normally, typically, this is a new franchise within a sub-franchise within Star Wars. This isn't an episode 10, 11, 12. This isn't part of that. That's why a lot of movies like Solo don't necessarily do well, which, by the way, Solo also had to deal with someone else playing Han Solo and other issues. But the point is, these other things are different from these main stories, these main franchises within Star Wars. So if you're looking at the projections from the analysts, you're going, yeah, but the analysts are wrong based on bro math. I mean, What are you drinking, man?
Movies is massive opening weekends and then a bigger drop off than we expect. Things like Project Hail Mary, what we saw with that was a big opening for what people expected it to do. And then it had incredible holds because people were hearing about this. People, I'll get into that. I'll watch.
And that could still happen with Mandalorian and Grogu. If the Mandalorian and Grogu could be a bomb because Thunderbolts was a bomb, even though they're not connected whatsoever, then the Mandalorian and Grogu could also do as well as Project Hail Mary because those movies are not connected whatsoever. So it really just depends on like your narrative. Is your glass half full or half empty? For these guys, it's always half empty. That's always the case. The sky is falling. They're crying wolf. This is their business model. This is what they do. They're trying their best to turn everything into a culture war argument. This one, they can't even do that, right? So they're in a weird spot with this movie. They're in a weird spot. These guys are in a weird spot where it doesn't tick off their normal outrage boxes, right? There's no diversity lead in the movie. There's no woman lead in the movie. You got Sigourney Weaver, but she's not a big character in the movie. She plays her part, but she's not a big character. There's no gay characters. There's no trans characters. There's not a lot of POC characters. Mostly it's just other aliens within the Star Wars universe. The story doesn't have any preachy messaging to it. There's no refugee stuff or allegory stuff to the real world. Like none of the things that these guys would normally complain about exist within the Mandalorian and Grogu. So they have to somehow trick everyone with the numbers. They have to convince people that what you're seeing isn't true. That what's in front of you isn't real. Like, we're looking at the numbers, and they can't even admit, and this is why, again, red flags. They can't even admit that the movie made back its production budget. It actually beat its production budget because it saved $21 million in tax credits. They can't even admit that the movie made back its production budget. It's a simple concession. They could easily go, we didn't like the movie. It still made back its production budget. We're going to see how it holds going into next weekend. It could be a huge, massive success for Disney. It could also underperform, have more of a centrist take on the projections like any normal person would do, hoping that it's going to do well, but understanding that it could still go bad, which I believe it could. It could still go bad. Yeah, this movie could underperform ultimately and not make $300 million, which is the number that they roughly need to actually be in the green based on the numbers that we know, not some arbitrary advertising number that I don't know whatever they're talking about. They said 600 million. I don't know where that number came from. They didn't even, in the article, they didn't even cite it. But they can't even do that. They can't even admit that the movie did well enough to get its production budget back. That's a problem.
Watch that. With Star Wars, everybody knows about this. Everybody knows that this is out there. And
so before, nobody asked for this, though. Nobody asked for this. When this movie was in production, when the movie was going to come out, you heard all of these guys say, it's not going to do anything. Nobody knows about this. Nobody cares about these characters. That's why they're not going to see it. But now that it's out, now that it's in theaters, now everybody loves Star Wars, guys. Everybody. Star Wars is alive and well. It's alive and well, and it's going to pull everybody into the theaters. Do you see how the standards work? I thought Star Wars was dead. I thought it was a dead property. So it should be real easy for them to go, hey, Star Wars is not a good property. Nobody cares about it anymore, and that's why this movie isn't doing well. It's real easy to say that because that's part of their existing narrative. But now we've switched to Star Wars as such a profitable brand name that this movie should have came out and made $500 million. But it's narrative. It's narrative. Star Wars is simultaneously dead and buried, but also the most popular thing in the world, and everybody should go out and watch Star Wars movies. It just depends on what day of the week these guys are doing videos.
You're going to have a very first and second weekend heavy showing. It is the fanboy franchises.
Oh.
That's why it's different. That's why it's different than Dune. That's why it's different than Project.
Okay, so we're back to this now. So the Star Wars is dead narrative must be over. So I don't want to hear them say it again. The Star Wars is dead narrative must be done. Because if you're arguing that these are heavily front-loaded franchises, which I would argue that. But these guys have said Star Wars is dead. So how can it be dead, but also heavily front-loaded fanboy properties that pull out a huge audience? Guys, come on. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Legitimately. It's dead, it's dead, it's dead. Oh, but it's also the most popular thing in the world, and the opening weekend has to be the biggest thing ever.
Hail Mary. It's Star Wars. It's the same reason you can't make those comparisons with Marvel movies, because the fans behave differently for these properties. They pre-buy tickets months.
Well, you just compared Thunderbolts to this one in this video, and it's a short-ass video.
In advance, if the hype levels are there. That's not the case with The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Oh,
and
okay.
Look,
so now there are no hype. He's shocked the movie underperformed because there are no hype levels, but Star Wars is also the hottest property in the world that's going to be massive on opening weekends.
Is actual Star Wars Day right now, May 25th, not the fake May 4th bullshit. If you want to say May the 4th be with you, that's fine. May 25th, the anniversary of the day that Star Wars came out in theaters. It is Star Wars Day today, at least in America. Okay. I'm actually in Japan right now, so technically it's, make sure, yes, it is Tuesday the 26th for me. It's Monday the 25th for a lot of people that are watching this right now. And yet we're talking about another massive failure for Disney Star Wars. This is a huge...
Massive failure. Makes its production budget back in more in opening weekend. Massive failure, guys. But everyone else is coping. But it's a massive failure. I can't listen to him anymore. What a cope video. Are you kidding me? Bro can't even admit that the movie made its production budget back. But we, the fans of the movie, we're the ones coping.